Now, most of us are familiar with the beginning of Parshas Vayetzei, when Yaakov Avinu is leaving his parents' home. He's leaving Eretz Yisrael and going to Haran to go to Lavan's house. And we know about the special dream that he has about the angels. So we'll just read that very quickly. Vayetzei Yaakov mi Beersheva vayelech Harana. He leaves Beersheva, which is the last outpost before he gets to Chutz La'aretz. He goes to Haran. Vayifga b'makom. Look at that. Those two words are very important. He arrives at the place. Vayolen sham kiva hashemesh. He lodges there because the sun has gone down. Vayikach me'avnei hamakom. He takes the stones of the place. Vayosim mirash. So puts them around his head. Vayishka b'makom ahu, and sleeps there for the night. Vayachalom, and he has a dream. V'hinei sulam mutzav arza. There's a ladder that is touching the ground. V'rosho magi hashmaim, and the top of the ladder goes up to the heavens. V'hinei malachei Elokim olim v'yordim bo, and the angels of God are going up and down the ladder. Now, less well known is the passage about the angels when Yaakov, after 20 years, returns to Eretz Yisrael, which is at the very end of the Parsha. So a lot of people know the story about the beginning of the Parsha, but sometimes we forget because we read it so quickly in Shul. But at the end of the Parsha, Yaakov Avinu has another encounter with the angels on his way back in. And there, it's a totally different kind of encounter. If you take a look in source number 3, V'Yaakov halach lidarko vayifga uvo malachei Elokim. Yaakov goes back on his road, and he is approached or encountered by the angels of God. Vayomer Yaakov ka'asher ra'am machanei Elokim zeh. Yaakov declares when he sees them, this is the camp of God. Vayikra shem hamakom hahu machanayim. And he calls the place the camps, in the plural. That's the end of the story. That's the end of the Parsha. That's how the Parsha ends until next week's Parsha, where Yaakov is now in Eretz Yisrael waiting to encounter his brother Esav. Now, there are a number of really very important issues to raise about the contrast between his encounter with the angels when he's leaving Eretz Yisrael and his encounter with the angels upon returning to Eretz Yisrael. Just a couple of points. I just want to highlight just two out of a number of things that you could perhaps observe. One is that when he's leaving, it says Vayifga b'makom. He arrives at the place. And when he arrives at the place, he sees the angels in his vision, in his dream. Here, at the end of the Parsha, in source number 3, it's not Yaakov coming to a place of being pogeya, of reaching a place, but rather what? It's just almost the opposite. The angels come to him. Vayifgu uvo malachei Elokim. He now is the object, not the person going out to meet the object. See, it's a very important distinction. Another very important distinction is that when Yaakov first experiences the angels, there are malachei Elokim olim v'yordim. They're going up and down, ascending and descending. Here, when he comes back to Eretz Yisrael, there's no one going up and there's no one going down. There's just angels. No more up and down. Now, you could argue that they're different angels, and that's a possibility. But that's not the way Rashi explains what's going on over here. Rashi, based on the Medrash, if you take a look in sources 2 and 4, just take a look at source number 2. Olim v'yordim, when it talks about the angels going up and down, olim techila v'achar kach yordim, first they were going up, and then they were coming down. Why? Rashi tells us, malachim shelivuhu ba'aretz ein yotzim chutz la'aretz v'alu la'rakia. Up until now, Yaakov had been escorted by the angels of Eretz Yisrael, and now that he was leaving, they could go no further, and so they ascended up to heaven. V'yardu malachei chutz la'aretz l'lavoto. And at this point, the angels of the diaspora, of outside of Eretz Yisrael, have to come down in order to escort him for the rest of the journey. So clearly what you see is that these are two classes of angels, The angels of Eretz Yisrael leaving and going back up, and the angels of Chutz La'aretz coming down to escort him for the rest of the way. Now, let's see what Rashi says in source number 4. Vayifga'u vo malachei Elokim, the angels of God encounter Yaakov, or reach Yaakov. Malachim shel Eretz Yisrael ba'u likrato lelavoto la'aretz. Here once again, we have the angels of Eretz Yisrael who had previously gone up to heaven. Now that Yaakov is coming back to Eretz Yisrael, they have to come to escort him to Eretz Yisrael. Now, if there was going to be a proper parallel between the two parts of the story, then just like in the first part, the angels of Eretz Yisrael went up to leave and the angels of Chutz La'aretz came down to escort him, we would have expected the same kind of vision of Malachim Olim V'Yordim. This time, the angels of Chutz La'aretz should have gone up because they had finished their task, and the angels of Eretz Yisrael should have been the ones coming down in order to escort him. But the Torah doesn't say that. The Torah doesn't say that that's what was going on over here. So these two observations lead me to make the following conclusion, that the Torah here is telling us something extremely powerful, is that we are dealing with two Yaakovs. We are dealing with the Yaakov of before spending 20 years in the house of Lavan, and we are dealing with, at the end of the story, the Yaakov after 20 years in the house of Lavan. And the transformation, the complete transformation that this person has undergone over those 20 years is quite dramatic. And you see that in two ways. The ways that I described the two contrasts. When you go through an experience like that of having lived with Lavan for 20 years, Yaakov has fortified himself to the point where he's no longer afraid of his place. Yaakov, as the younger man, leaves Eretz Yisrael with great trepidation because he realizes that he's not strong enough to endure any kind of environment. He knows that he's vulnerable. He knows that he's an impressionable young man. He knows that his environment could, in some way, adversely change him. And therefore, he's very frightened. And therefore, he knows that wherever he goes, that's going to affect him. So it's not that the place comes to him, but he has to go to the place. This is an acknowledgement of Yaakov and of the Torah making about Yaakov, that Yaakov was impressionable, and his place did determine his madrega, who he was. And therefore he sees a very dramatic difference, a shift in holiness between Eretz Yisrael and Chutz La'aretz. Because he is so affected by his environment, he notices that the Malachim of Eretz Yisrael are of one class of angels, and the Malachim of Chutz La'aretz are another class of angels, and it fills him with a tremendous fear, because he realizes that he's going to a totally different place, and this has the potential to adversely affect him. But now that he's gone through 20 years of Lavan, and he's been able to endure, not only endure, but to actually flourish in the house of Lavan, to learn how to contend with people who maybe appear to themselves as Lavan, as white on the surface, on the exterior, but in reality are insidious and are constantly trying to destroy and make light of and to dismantle him, and yet he's able to emerge whole. He has become more important than the place. He now has built himself into someone who will no longer allow himself to be influenced by his place. He's proven to himself that no matter where in the world I am, I will still be Yaakov. If I've been able to survive the house of Lavan for 20 years, then I can survive anything, no matter where Hashem places me in this world. And I will no longer be intimidated by my environment or be in constant fear that if I place myself in a certain place or a certain environment, I may be adversely affected. And therefore, he realizes he's the place. Wherever I am, that's where Yaakov Avinu is. And I don't have to go to a place to become Yaakov Avinu. I will be Yaakov wherever I am. And once he has that sense of strength and confidence in himself, it's no longer him having to go to where the angels are, but the angels recognize that he's the place. That's why the angels go to him, because he's established himself as Yaakov, and he's a walking place. That's why it's Vayifgu Uvo Malachei Elokim. The angels come to him instead of him to go to the angels. And instead of him having to fear that there are different levels, there's a level of Eretz Yisrael, and there's a level of Chutz La'aretz, Yaakov says, no more. For me, all the angels are the same, because Hashem is everywhere. And I will be no more holy and no less holy, whether I'm in Eretz Yisrael or whether I'm in Chutz La'aretz. There's no more ascending or descending, no more shifting, because I am Yaakov no matter where I am, no matter where I go. That's why I have this quote by Thomas Carlyle, who was a philosopher in the 19th century, who says, the history of the world is but the biography of great men. Because the truly great man, or men here meaning men and women, the truly great human being is the person who is not affected by their environment, but rather who defines what the environment shall be. When we determine who we are, independent of the place where we find ourselves, that's when we begin to make monumental changes in society and in our communities and so forth. But if we allow ourselves to be the affected and not the affecter, so then we are but the Yaakov at the beginning of the story and not the Yaakov at the end of the story. And what's very important for us to remember is that, and this is something that you've probably heard me say a number of times already if you've been coming to this class, is that sometimes we dumb down our religion to the level of our 5-year-olds. We have to remember that just because Judaism and Torah means something to a 5-year-old student does not mean that we have to perpetuate the childlike Yiddishkeit like the Rambam was speaking about before. Our children are not strong enough to be independent of their environment. And that's why we need to protect them. That's why we need to place them in a makam kedusha, a place of holiness, and a place where they will be protected from external negative influences. We need to put filters on our internet, and we need to limit their exposure to the outside world because they don't possess the strength that a Yaakov Avinu, after having lived 20 years with Lavan, would possess. But as we mature and as we grow, we have to start to realize that there's a certain strength that we possess after having done this for many, many years. And we have to stop fearing the shadows, that there are demons lurking and monsters lurking in the shadows no matter where we turn in the outside world. There comes a point in our maturity when we say, no longer will I be defined by my place, but rather I will define the place where I am. And that's why it's incumbent upon the mature Jew, the Jew that the Rambam was discussing, to go out into the world fearlessly with the confidence that I've reached and attained a certain level of growth and strength, and now I can go out and make a positive impact on the outside world. Now, of course, this is all premised on the fact that you know who you are. And that's not an easy thing to attain. Sometimes people may deceive themselves and think that I'm stronger than I really am, and that's why we see some tragic stories of people who had set out to change the world and then turned out themselves to be changed and transformed into darker people. But don't be daunted by that. If you reached a certain level of maturity, if you're a mother or a grandmother at this stage in your lives, then you should have a certain level of confidence that I can make a difference and I can be one of the great men who changes the history of the world, at least for the sake of the Jewish people, and then possibly even for the rest of mankind. Yes?
What you're saying fits in beautifully with the fact that we say this as part of Tfilas HaDerech. So, in other words, you're going someplace else, you remain you, even if you're going to a different place.
Beautiful. Excellent. Yes?
Just a little correction. She's coming back as Israel. She's going as Yaakov.
Same, exactly. Exactly.
This change did happen.
Yes, this transformation took place.